government, no Conservative government, Mr. Speaker, ever wants to raise taxes, and I will be honest with the House, I accept that this breaks a manifesto commitment, which is not something I do lightly, but a global pandemic was in no one's manifesto, Mr. Speaker. And I think the people of this country understand that in their bones, and they can see the enormous steps this government and the Treasury have taken. And after all the extraordinary actions that have been taken to protect lives and livelihoods over the last 18 months, this is the right, the reasonable and the fair approach, enabling our amazing NHS to come back strongly from the crisis, tackling the COVID backlogs, funding our nurses, making sure people get the care and treatment they need in the right place at the right time, and ending a chronic and unfair anxiety for millions of people and their families up and down this country, and I commend this statement to the House.
I now call the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement. I think I had almost as much notice as the Cabinet. Can I also thank everybody who works in the NHS and social care. Mr. Speaker, during the darkest days of the pandemic, they kept our health service from collapsing, they looked after the elderly when others couldn't, and they rolled out the vaccine, which has finally provided the light at the end of the tunnel. Despite their efforts, we're facing the toughest winter in the history of our health service. Not only do we have the threat of another COVID surge, waiting lists for diagnosis and treatment have reached record levels, we risk cancer survival rates going backwards for the first time ever, and social care remains neglected and strained. It is a crisis. But how did we get here, Mr. Speaker? The pandemic has undoubtedly placed the NHS under huge strain, but that is only part of the story. A decade of Conservative neglect weakened the NHS. Waiting lists had spiralled up 2 million before the pandemic. Targets were missed on cancer, on A&E, on mental health before the pandemic. The same is true, Mr. Speaker, on social care. £8 billion cut despite growing demand before the pandemic. Carers on poverty wages without secure contracts before the pandemic. 100,000 vacancies before the pandemic. And the Prime Minister has just referenced the 30,000 hospital beds occupied by those that should go into the community. And he called that, this is before the pandemic, an indictment of failure. Who had been in government for 10 years at that stage? Just remind me. An indictment, Prime Minister, an indictment of failure is an accurate description of the situation in our health service and social care before the pandemic.